Hello, everyone. Welcome to our recorded discussion in Assessment and Learning 1. And for this video, we will be learning about measurement, assessment, and evaluation in outcome based education. And here are our learning outcomes for this video. First is that you are expected to distinguish concepts such as testing, measurement, assessment, and evaluation, and then cite and explain various approaches to assessment, such as assessment for, of, or as learning. Let us begin with an end goal question. Do test, measurement, assessment, and evaluation mean the same thing? Well, in classroom setup or classroom assessment, these words are actually interchangeably used by educators. However, let it be known that they hold a different important meaning distinguishably from each other. Let's start with the word test. A test is simply a tool. It is an instrument made up of questions or tasks used to collect information or gather information, usually from our learners. A good example would be a 20-item quiz, a spelling test, a practical cooking task, a teaching demonstration, or any performance task. Remember, the test is just the tool, not the decision itself. Let us now define what is measurement. Measurement is a process of assigning numbers to the performance. It actually answered the question, how much did the learner get? Good example would be when a learner scored 18 out of 20, 85%, or 120 words per minute in reading as a standard. Measurement gives us data, but it does not tell us yet as if it is good or a bad assessment. In classroom assessment, some of the traits are observable, or it could also be used using standardized tool. For observable, there are indicators, variable, and factor that we can measure. Indicators such as the reading comprehension, the computational skills, and analytical skills are actually example of indicators we can observe from our learners. When these indicators are combined together, this can make up a variable called problem-solving skills. And when it is paired with critical thinking skills, these variables can make a factor, which is the mathematical ability of our learners. In this sense, we understand that we can actually measure indicators, variable, and factor as part of our classroom assessment. So if a student solves math problem well, the indicator is solving correctly. The variable is problem solving skill, and the factor, which later will be considered as deferred outcome, is the mathematical ability. Let us now proceed to the different types of measurement. Measurement can be objective or subjective. Good example is a fixed answer for objective. It has the same score no matter who will check. There is a high consistency or a high reliability of scores. And for subjective, it is usually based on judgment and criteria. Multiple choice, true or false, or these are what we call selected response and alternate response, are called objective measurement. There is also what we call open-ended questions in subjective measurement, such as essays, oral reports, or performance tasks. Remember that objective is fixed and subjective may depend on the rater. Now let us now proceed to the word assessment. Assessment comes from the word asedere, mean to sit beside. So, from the word sit beside, it is a continuous process of gathering evidence of learning over time. So, it is now a set of quizzes, projects, portfolios, and longitudinal observations from our learners. The word evaluation from the word value means this is where we make judgment. It could be through rating or through deciding whether our learner gets to have a passing grade or a failing grade. It is now valuing the grade of 90, whether it is outstanding or satisfactory, and the decision also of promoting to the next level or retaining in the same year level. And at the same time, it is evaluation also involves revising our teaching method. So it is not just a one-way approach in a part of learner, but also in a part of teacher. So evaluation now is about decision making. To summarize the concept of teaching, measurement, assessment, and evaluation, it is then safe to say that we measure variables and indicators of learning in subject matter through testing, and we assess the learning outcome and evaluate the results. Let us now proceed to the next learning outcome we have in this video, which is the assessment for of as learning. And these are what we call approaches to assessment. This happens during instruction. We call it assessment for learning. It involves using evidence and student knowledge, understanding, and skill to inform their teaching. Here, the teacher asks questions during discussions. There are what we call exit slips given and feedbacks on draft. Let it be known that for DepEd or Department of Education, in the DepEd Order 8 series of 2015, which is the classroom assessment for basic education learners, the diagnostic test that we know should be done prior to the lesson is also considered as formative assessment. For assessment of learning, this is now what happens after the instruction. The purpose is to grade and report, unlike with assessment for learning, which is to improve learning. Here, it is either to grade and report the score. We would also like to highlight the word to assess achievement against outcome and standards. Assessment as learning is the reflective part of assessment. This is when the student assess themselves. The purpose is to develop independent or self-paced learners. Examples are the making of the reflection journals, the self-checklist, and the learning logs they made. So, for comparison purposes, we get to have off learning, which is formal test, periodic, or for grades, and for learning could be an ongoing feedback, improves learning, and assessment as learning is reflection and self evaluation. Let us have additional examples to these different approaches in assessment. So, in the table, we can say that assessment of learning is a summative, assessment for learning is formative, and also assessment as learning is another formative assessment. Here, what the teacher is expected for summative is that to determine the progress or application of knowledge against a standard. For learning, is for the teachers and peers to check progress, as learning is to take responsibility for their own learning. Who get to lead or who get to be the character in these different approaches for assessment of it's the teacher mostly, although the one who will be answering the assessment is are still the learners. But in this case, it is called it is usually provided in a final or in a formal examinations or in an authentic assessment, which we will be learning in assessment and learning too. Assessment for learning, it is actually usually the teacher and the peers since it is formative in nature. And assessment as learning is the learners and the peers. Additional differentiation of this are when when it is conducted can be through periodic report, ongoing feedback, and continual reflection. For how, it can be through formal assessments for assessment of. For learning, it involves formal and informal assessment. Let us not be fixated because we can still have formative assessment even with hand signals or non-verbal cues from our learner. And also, for assessment as learning, it can be also through formal and informal feedback and self-assessment through the use of reflection or journal entries. So for the question why do we need to have assessment of learning? That's for ranking and reporting, and also including the promotion. For the assessment for learning, it is to improve learning. And for the assessment as learning, it is to deeper learning and learning how to learn, which is the concept of metacognition. The emphasis again on assessment of learning is scoring grades and completion. The assessment for learning is feedback, support, and collaboration. And assessment as learning is collaboration, reflection, and self evaluation. And that would be for this topic. Going back to our learning outcomes, I believe we were able to distinguish different concepts such as testing, measurement, assessment, and evaluation. And also, we were able to cite and explain different approaches to assessment through assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning. I'm sure after this, we will now be able to answer the formative quiz or assessment we have for this topic. More examples will be provided during our synchronous discussion through face-to-face meeting. Thank you and see you again on the next video for assessment and learning.